Well, today, opera friends, we are confronted by a masterpiece. Yeah, that's a term that's thrown around a lot in the arts and in music especially, and it really fits this time. Mozart's Don Giovanni is one of the great works of Western man in the last 1,000 years, in my opinion, right up there with the discovery of the polio vaccine and the Magna Carta and Gutenberg's printing press and anything else you want to mention. It gives one hope for the human race. If we can create something as wise and profound and beautiful and dazzling as Mozart's Don Giovanni, then maybe it's okay if humanity continues to reproduce for another generation or so. But what is so masterful about it? Well, we'll get into that as best we can. I'd rather have hundreds of hours to explain it to you rather than the few minutes that WHRO and its sister stations have graciously allotted me today, but we'll do what we can. Don Giovanni is an iceberg. In one little discussion, I can't even give you the tip of the iceberg. I can give you about 5 snowflakes sitting on top of the tip. But here we go. Don Juan is one of the great and fascinating characters in all of literature. He made his debut in 1630 with a drama, a comedy actually, by Tirso de Molina, called The Trickster of Seville, El Burlador de Sevilla. And he's had so many incarnations in poetry and opera and music and song and instrumental music and art and so forth. You could fill up a legal pad with all of his recreations. In 1888, the young Richard Strauss wrote a symphonic poem called Don Juan. And this music really captures something that I think all musicians have responded to in the character of Don Juan. See if you hear what I hear in these opening bars of Strauss's Don Juan, that charisma and life force and vitality that is the hallmark of this immortal character. And there it is, that hot-blooded young Spanish nobleman with such a zest and lust for life that he is able to bed over 2,000 women by the time he's just in his early 20s, spreading mischief all across the European continent. Now, Mozart's Don Giovanni came 101 years earlier, just about, in 1787. And, of course, Mozart has a completely different musical language. He is bound by the limits of Viennese classical style, something more formal, something more balanced, something less wild and self-indulgent in expression. But nevertheless, in this passage from the overture to Mozart's opera, don't you hear as equally a powerful evocation of that vitality and charisma? Music is very good at capturing the essence of this character. Now, so in October of 1787, Mozart's Don Giovanni has its premiere in Prague. It was a kind of a command performance. Prague loved his Marriage of Figaro the previous year. They wanted another opera. And so this was put together in all due haste by Mozart and his librettist Lorenzo da Ponte, who also did Figaro. Now, a lot of people don't know that back in February of the same year, just a few months before Mozart's opera, there was an opera called Don Giovanni Tenorio by a composer you never heard of, Giuseppe Gazzaniga, with a libretto by Giovanni Bertatti. I don't want to say that Da Ponte plagiarized Bertatti's libretto, but he was certainly very familiar with it, because it is, with the exception of some material that Da Ponte added in the second act to flesh out the opera to more full-length dimensions, the scenario and the layout of arias and ensembles is pretty much identical with Gazzaniga. So, we talk about Mozart being such a great opera composer. Is it just that his music is prettier, more beautiful than other composers? No, that it's a question of the skill sets, of having an aptitude for how to tell stories with music is part of what makes it a... Now, there are other elements, and we'll get into those as our hour proceeds. But I thought it might be useful to do a little bit of side-by-side comparison of Gazzaniga's Don Giovanni and Mozart's Don Giovanni, just to see where Mozart outdoes him and how he improved on the material. And let's start with the end of the opera. You know how it goes. Don Juan has murdered the father of one of the women with whom he's involved, Donna Anna. He kills the commendatore. And, of course, at the end of the opera of both Gazzaniga and Mozart, the animated statue of the commendatore comes to a sort of supernatural life, bursts into Don Giovanni's palace, and casts him into everlasting perdition in the flames of Hades. Let's hear the entrance of the statue in both Gazzaniga and Mozart. So here are the first words of this terrifying specter, of this statue that has miraculously come to life and burst in on the scene as Gazzaniga envisions it. Okay, I don't know about you. I'm disappointed. Gazzaniga's statue sounds like a stuffy, pompous old man. Where is the terror? Where is the sheer strangeness and alien presence of this thing, this monster that has come to life? A Gazzaniga statue sounds like, the CEO of a corporation giving the quarterly earnings report to the board of directors. Gazzaniga's statue sounds like the mayor of a small town addressing a crowd of citizens at a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a new Starbucks. It misses the mark. Now, in Gazzaniga's defense, he wasn't trying to terrify his audience. You have to understand, Mozart was the first artist who really took the story seriously and saw elements of terror and cosmic profundity in these events. Gazzaniga, like many other dramatists before him, played it as a sex comedy, like a kind of a cheap, vulgar sex comedy that Hollywood might turn out in a contemporary movie. He was not after terror. So, we can't really fault him for failing to do what he wasn't trying to do. Nevertheless, let's compare that with Mozart, and I'll point out what I think is interesting about it on the other side.
Oltre
Now, what I find very clever and a triumph of Mozart's imagination is the musical language he invented for the Commendatore statue. It is inhuman, unhuman. It's mechanical. It's stiff and awkward. Did you hear those disjunct angular leaps in the vocal line at the beginning? Dee da dee da da dee. Whereas Gazzaniga's statue sang human-sounding melodies, no different from any of the other human characters. Mozart makes his statue either sing in this angular, disjointed style or in monotone, repeated notes, kind of like the way robots spoke in such a mechanical fashion in vintage TV shows and movies, something that's obviously no longer human. And I also liked those rushing scales, those sweeping, descending and ascending scales under the statue's repeated notes, which kind of simulate the waves of terror that poor Leporello is feeling as he hides under the dining room table. Now, let's switch back to the beginning of the opera, what happens right after the overture in both Gazzaniga's Don Giovanni and Mozart's Don Giovanni. As the curtain goes up, Don Giovanni is inside the palace of the Commendatore. In fact, we know, because his servant is going to tell us, that he is up there canoodling with Donna Anna. We're not there to see it, and that's important. We'll talk about that in a few minutes from now. But so we're down there keeping company with Leporello. In Gazzaniga, he's called Pasquariello. And they both have, each of those versions of the Don Giovanni's servant has a little solo, a small aria in which they are griping like a private in the army. Oh, they're unhappy with having to stand guard while their master has all the fun. They're tired of it. They're sleep deprived. Sometimes it's raining and bad weather, and they wish they could be the fine gentlemen. All right, now, so they're both saying essentially the same thing, just slightly reworded in Da Ponte's libretto. Here is the Gazzaniga servant's aria for Pasquariello at the beginning of this opera.
La gran bestia il mio padrone, ma il grand'asino son io. Troppa soggezione non lo mando a far squartar, non lo mando a far squartar, non lo mando a far squartar.
Now, I can sympathize with you if you're listening to that and you're puzzled and saying, well, Glenn, I don't get it. What's the matter with that? It sounded okay to me. That sounded like, an opera buffa Italian aria. It sounded pretty good. And I agree, that's not horrible music. I'm not saying that Gazzaniga is an amateurish musician or that he can't create pleasant music. That certainly was. But the word that I would use with Gazzaniga is generic. His music never gives me any information about the character. It could be, that character could be singing about anything. Mozart, on the other hand, is a born dramatist. He understands that it's not the job of the libretto to tell you who the characters are. It's the job of the music, not only to tell you who the characters are, but to tell you what they are doing. So the introduction to Leporello's griping aria, Notte giorno faticar, the orchestra is painting the picture. It's graphically describing what the character is doing. So listen for that. What is Leporello doing? Leaning against a lamppost, smoking a cigarette? Now, let me tell you what I heard in that little opening of Leporello's aria. First of all, the orchestral introduction. Bum, 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 brum, bum, 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 brum. What is Leporello doing? It's pretty obvious, isn't it? He's pacing back and forth. It's right there in the music. It's like stage directions in Mozart's score. And just as an aside, I can tell you nothing irritates me more than when I see it staged and Leporello is just standing still smoking a cigarette or something. You know, stage directors, please pay attention to Mozart's music. He almost choreographs it for you. So that's just one of my pet private peeves. So watch for that in our production. Let's see how our director manages to realize what Mozart is giving us. Now, the other thing I notice is that how it characterizes the fact that he is a peasant versus what he fantasizes about being. Because, you know, the other thing about this bump, 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 it's kind of clunky and heavy. It gives us the image of a heavy-footed peasant going back and forth, waiting impatiently for his master. But when Leporello sings, Voglio far il gentil uomo, I want to be the fine gentleman, he sings. And when he did that, did you happen to notice the elegant aristocratic flourish in the orchestra? There again, it's the contrast between the oafish, heavy footsteps of the peasant versus his fantasy of being an elegant aristocratic gentleman. In about 15 seconds of music, look how much information Mozart gave you. These are the skill sets of a brilliant opera composer. Nobody ever exceeded it. Now, what else is great about Don Giovanni? What else is masterful about the masterpiece? For one thing, I would say that it's kind of unknowable. You can watch a murder mystery on TV, and at the end you understand everything. You understand who did it. You understand why they did it. You understand how they did it. The mystery has been solved. But the greatest mysteries are mysteries that can't ever be solved, or at least where people cannot agree on what the solution is. And there are mysteries. There are unknowable things in this incredible opera. For instance, let's take Don Giovanni. He is a bad person. He has the only redeeming qualities he has are those qualities we mentioned earlier of the vitality and the charisma that allowed him to charm thousands of women into bed. Other than that, he's a murderer, a liar, a seducer. He treats women terribly. He uses them up like tissues and throws them away when he's done with them. And so, as we heard, the statue, which is, of course, a proxy for God, for heavenly justice, comes to give him his just deserts at the end. However, the statue gives him an out. There's an out clause in this contract of damnation. He says, just repent. Say you're sorry. Pentiti scelerato. In fact, here is that portion from the penultimate scene of Mozart's Don Giovanni, and you have this titanic contest of wills between heaven and this irredeemable mortal Don Giovanni, the demand for repentance, and notice what Don Giovanni's answer is.
Lo sai che cielo è questo mai? Ti dico il suo figlio è l'ultimo momento che non mi nemmeno tanto me ti discellerà ave quei sì
Pentiti scelerato. Repent, you scoundrel. What would you say if you saw the flames of hell opening up on your living room floor, and you saw demons grinning with pitchforks, and you smelled the sulfur? Wouldn't you say, golly, I'm sorry. I am sorry for everything I ever did. To anyone I may have offended, I certainly offer my sincere apology. Any of us would. And what did Don Giovanni say? He said, no, vecchio infatuato. No, you foolish old man. No. Yes, you will. See, no, I won't. Who says this? Who commits himself to everlasting punishment by refusing to take up Almighty God on his offer of mercy if he will simply repent? Why? See, and as you can tell from the music, Mozart is not playing this for laughs, not like Gazzaniga. He's not being trivial about it. This is in deadly earnest. Mozart wants us to place ourselves in Don Giovanni's place. And so then we're led to wonder, why? Why does he not take him up on the offer and simply repent? Can I just tell you, friends, there are libraries full of books written about this. There are dissertations written about this, scholarly articles in theology journals as well as musical journals, trying to figure out the answer to this question. And after a half a century of being familiar with Don Giovanni, I've arrived to the point where I think there are two possible answers. Number one is that Don Giovanni has the same attitude as another famous denizen of hell, and that would be John Milton's fallen angel Lucifer in Paradise Lost. There's a section of Paradise Lost in which Satan finds himself standing in downtown hell at the corner of Main and Elm Streets, and he's surveying his new neighborhood, and he says, is this the region, the soil, the clime? Is this the seat that we must change for heaven? This mournful gloom for that celestial light? Be it so, since who now is sovereign can dispose and bid what shall be right. He says, receive thy new possessor, hell, one who brings a mind not to be changed by place or time. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell or hell of heaven. To reign is worth ambition, though in hell. And then the line that will be familiar to many of you, better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. So is Don Giovanni, like Lucifer, like Satan, sort of a courageous, rebellious anti-hero? Is he showing courage? Is Don Giovanni saying, look, so I don't follow all your rules, and now you want to punish me? I don't get to go to heaven because I don't get to pass go and collect $200 because I did all the wrong things and I didn't do the things that you said I should do. Instead, I did the things you said I shouldn't do. Well, who says you get to make the rules? Oh, right, you do because you're God. Well, guess what? I think Don Giovanni may feel that trying to get into heaven is like being in Las Vegas, where the house always wins. He's tired of being in trouble for breaking the rules. He wants to make his own rules. He's not sorry for anything he did. He lived the life he chose to live, and he'll take whatever comes now. Basically, he says, I'm not playing your game, God. I quit. I quit. So is there a kind of perverse bravery and courage in his attitude? But then again, the other possibility is that he's simply a sick puppy, that there's something fatally wrong with him. Now, the same, we played a bit of Richard Strauss's Don Juan. In the same year that Strauss wrote that, there was a psychologist in Germany named Dr. Koch who examined mentally ill patients, mentally unbalanced patients, dysfunctional people who could not function well in society. And he made a special study, and he collected notes comparing their various symptoms. And he realized that he was discovering a new pathology, the previously unknown to science, and he called it psychopathology. We're talking about the discovery of the individual we know as a psychopath. This is from 1888, and it's still useful to look at the collection of the symptoms of the psychopath because, friends, Don Giovanni rings the bell on every single one. So these include a lack of guilt or remorse, a lack of empathy for other people, recognizing that other people are alive, just like the psychopath. They tend to look at other people as just objects. A lack of deep emotional attachments. They have a hard time experiencing authentic emotional states like you and I do. The only emotional state, the only affect that is authentic to the psychopath is rage. And we observe that in Don Giovanni. Narcissism, superficial charm. And that's going to be important, especially when we're talking about Zerlina and Donna Anna in just a moment. Dishonesty, well, Don Giovanni lies. He's nothing but a liar. He lies like you and I breathe. Manipulativeness, again, let's notice that when we get to Zerlina. And reckless risk-taking. So perhaps Don Giovanni refuses to repent because he isn't afraid, because he's incapable of experiencing fear. Fear isn't real to him. The only thing that's real to Don Giovanni is the gratification of his senses and rage and frustration. So it's one or the other, or perhaps a combination of both, but it's one of those things that the answer is not given to us. We're meant to think about it by Mozart. There's no explanation for Don Giovanni's reaction to the threat of damnation. It simply is. Now, there's another unknowable aspect, and the most fascinating character in the opera is Donna Anna, and we cannot truly understand her. And again, there are great Mozart scholars who are in total disagreement about what is going on with Donna Anna. You'll recall that when we were listening to Leporello's opening aria in Mozart's opera, I observed that we don't see what's going on in Donna Anna's bedroom. We're out there standing guard with Leporello, but in a furious action sequence, perhaps you know what happens immediately after the aria. Out comes Don Giovanni wearing a mask, and it's the middle of the night, it's quite late, and he's being pursued by a furious Donna Anna. And the first words out of her mouth are quite provocative. She says, "Even if you kill me, I will never let you go." That can be interpreted two ways, can't it? She could either be expressing, "I'm hanging on to you until the police come because you assaulted me." But she could say, "Where are you going, darling? I will never let you go. Don't leave." Well, you know that after that, there's the short-lived duel with the Commendatore. He's killed. Leporello and Don Giovanni make their escape. Anna's fiancé, Don Ottavio, arrives, and they grieve over the fallen Commendatore's body. She makes her fiancé swear to get vengeance, and there's that, and we're done with her for a while. Now, later in Act 1, midway through Act 1, Donna Anna is alone with her fiancé, and she takes the time to describe what Don Giovanni did to her. She has a searing, extremely dramatic and intense accompanied recitative with the full orchestra, in which she describes in graphic detail the nature of the assault. He came into her room. He was wearing a mask. It was dark. He pinned her down on the bed. He put his hand over her mouth so she couldn't cry out. And she screamed and called for help, but no one came, and so forth. This is a traumatizing account. And here is a bit of that accompanied recitative in which we are getting a detailed description of an alleged sexual assault. Now, you can take her at her word, or you can be suspicious of her story. And, if you're the great Mozart scholar Alfred Einstein does believe Donna Anna. He claims that those who think that Donna Anna was in love with Don Giovanni or that she was a willing partner in any sexual escapade are being foolish, and that that's not how 18th century theater works, and that we must believe Donna Anna. But there are others who find that Mozart gives us cause to have suspicions about her story. I have to say that this sequence of that recitative, the beginning of which we just heard, followed by the great aria Orsai chi l'onore, never fails to give me goose flesh. I admire this aria and the preceding recitative on three levels. Number one, the character is just kind of gobsmacks me. Here's the thing. Donna Anna is not a very nice person or a very pleasant person. She is wealthy. She's entitled. She is hard to please. I think her fiancé, Don Ottavio, if they wind up getting married, is going to have a very tough go of it through the duration of their marriage, trying to please someone who is incapable of being pleased or happy. But in her fury, in her passionate loathing of Don Giovanni, if that's what it is, there's something kind of magnificent about her. She is like a fierce, wild animal, raging, and you just have to be in awe of this larger-than-life, very intense, passionate personality. I'm also in awe of any singer who can sail through the vocal challenges of the aria Orsai chi l'onore and make it sound effortless, because it's daunting. The soprano voice is made to unfurl like a banner at just the height of rage and intense passion. And then the third level is that I just take my hat off to Mozart, who really hits the ball out of the park in terms of capturing not only the magnificence of this magnificent woman, as troublesome and as conflicted as we feel about her, but also gets all of the kind of subtle psychology that's going on with her. So here's just a little bit of towards the end of this aria, Orsai chi l'onore. Now, why do I have reservations about what Donna Anna is reporting, about what she is alleging? She is calling Don Giovanni a rapist. She's saying that she was assaulted violently in a sexual manner. And, of course, she's also, in that area, calling for Don Ottavio to get vengeance, to bring justice for the murder of her father and for the debauching of her own honor as a woman. Why do I doubt her? Well, for one thing, we know that intense passion can sometimes be the opposite side of the coin of intense love. The passion of hate and the passion of love can be related. And just as Don Giovanni has an intense and passionate nature, we wonder maybe if she might not actually respond to that. But then the other thing is that we only have her word for it, don't we? We were not there as first-hand witnesses to see what happened in that boudoir. The only people who know what happened in Anna's bedroom are Anna and Giovanni. But we do get to be first-hand witnesses to the other two women with whom Giovanni canoodles. Those are the peasant Zerlina and the respectable middle-class woman Donna Elvira. You know, it's deliberate that Giovanni interacts with a wealthy, noble woman, upper class, with a middle-class woman, and with a peasant, because one of the cautionary tale elements of Don Giovanni is that society during the Enlightenment, during the Age of Reason, was concerned that sexual licentiousness might lead to the collapse of society, of just the failure of society, like the crash of the Roman Empire. And so it was important to show this being a danger to every aspect, every strata of society, from upper class to low class. Now, in the seduction of Zerlina, in this duet, La ci darem la mano, you know the story, probably. Zerlina is getting married to the peasant boy Mazzetto on the very day that Don Giovanni encounters them. And being the manipulative genius that he is, he gets rid of the wedding party and he gets rid of the groom, sends them on bogus errands, is alone with Zerlina and tells her, "You don't want to marry that clod. I'm nuts about you. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Come away with me. I will change your life." And this all happens in this very famous duet, La ci darem la mano. But ask yourself, does this sound like a man who has to use violence and rape to engage with women? What do you hear there in that duet? Do you hear violence? Do you hear a rapist? Do you hear a guy who has to pin a woman to a bed? No, you hear charm. You hear romance. Well, it's not real romance, but it's the simulation, the imitation of a romantic heart. And you hear a charisma. So Mozart does this deliberately. We are meant to compare what our own eyes and ears took in with Zerlina versus the story that Donna Anna has given us, the one where we didn't see for ourselves. We are meant to say, something's wrong here. Something doesn't match. How come he's like two different people? And then we also have the other thing that might make us wonder about Donna Anna is the nature of her relationship with Don Ottavio. Immediately after Anna's aria Orsai chi l'onore, Ottavio is left by himself to kind of process what he's heard. And he sings an aria Dalla sua pace, in which he reflects on, golly, she's unhappy, and when she's unhappy, I'm unhappy. And the only thing that makes me happy is when she's happy, and gee whiz, I love her. And this aria is very lovely, but compare the characterization of Ottavio to the characterization of the woman, this hot firebrand of a temperamental woman with whom he's supposed to be getting married. Now compare that passive affect of Dalla sua pace with the over-the-top, intense, fieriness of Orsai chi l'onore. Do Anna and Ottavio really sound like a good match to you? Well, some people think opposites attract, but I just don't know. Don Ottavio is not going to be a match for this woman. There's an old-fashioned term, a kind of a quaint term, that people used to use in our language to describe men like Don Ottavio. He is a milquetoast. He is an ineffectual nobleman born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He's never done a day of hard work in his life. He is completely ineffectual at trying to please his fiancée or trying to bring justice to this rogue Don Giovanni. We don't understand what she sees in him. She is probably not. She probably did not choose Don Ottavio. The Commendatore probably was the one who wanted her to marry this young milquetoast nobleman. And as far as that goes, throughout the opera, on several occasions, Ottavio tries to broach the subject of their wedding. He'll say, perhaps this would be a good time for us to discuss our wedding plans, and she always cuts him off. Oh, not now. Not now. Later. Even at the end of the opera, when Don Giovanni no longer exists and she's free to marry him, you'll discover that she's even saying, no, we can't even talk about getting married for at least a year. So put all of these things together. I just don't know if I believe Donna Anna, but I also don't know if I don't believe her. This I can tell you. Mozart wants us to wonder. Mozart is deliberately being provocative. There is something wrong with Donna Anna's story, but we can't be sure. Because, again, this is not like a murder mystery on TV. We don't get the answer at the end. It is an unknowable aspect of this masterpiece. Well, we haven't discussed the third of the three women, Donna Elvira. She is a very respectable middle-class lady with middle-class morals and values. She is the most tragic figure in this opera. She gets humiliated by Giovanni count them, 1, 2, 3, 4 times. The first time happened before the curtain rose on Act 1, when back in her hometown, wherever it is she lives, it might be Barcelona, it might be Madrid, she was debauched by Don Giovanni, seduced because he had promised to marry her, but then he just left her. So that was humiliating. She thought that they were going to be man and wife and grow old together. Then she was humiliated during Leporello's famous catalog aria, in which he tried to tell her, sweetheart, just give up. He's never going to marry you. You're not the first. You won't be the last. In fact, here's a list of how many women he has seduced in all the countries in Europe. And we watch her face fall during the catalog aria as the reality of her humiliation sinks into her. Then she's humiliated for a third time in Act 2 when Leporello, who has exchanged clothing with Don Giovanni, wearing Don Giovanni's finery, thus temporarily bringing to reality his fantasy that he had spoken of in his aria about getting to be the fine gentleman, where he, from a distance, talks sweetly to Donna Elvira, who's up in the balcony of her inn, and pretending to be Don Giovanni, seduces her all over again. And we realize that when she finds out that it's really his servant, that will be just an awful trauma for her to experience. And then, of course, for the fourth time, just before the entrance of the statue in the penultimate scene, Donna Elvira bursts in begging for him to take her back one more time, and this time he openly mocks her and sends her away sobbing. And the thing is, this woman, friends, do you have any family members or friends who got stuck in a bad relationship and couldn't move on? There's a little bit of the OC disorder in Elvira's obsession with Don Giovanni. She hates him, and yet she would take him back. She hopes that he's struck by lightning, and yet when he smiles at her, she just goes all limp inside. She is stuck. It is obsessive-compulsive. and she knows it. She is miserable because she knows that she is making a fool of herself and she can't stop. She's like a hamster on a treadmill, endlessly racing in this circle, and she can't hop off of that treadmill. And she has a most astonishing aria. For me, it's the highlight of the opera. In Act 2, she is full of anguish at her own foolishness. She says, "How can I do this to myself? I love him, I hate him, I love him, I hate him." Now, before I play you Mozart's aria, I've got one more side-by-side with good old Giuseppe Gazzaniga, the guy who wrote the Don Giovanni Tenorio opera buffa 6 or 7 months before Mozart's opera. We played some examples from that earlier in this discussion. Let's have one more side-by-side comparison. Elvira in Gazzaniga's opera sings an aria called Povere Femmine. Poor woman, what a poor woman I am to let this man humiliate me like this. And it's a lovely aria, but we'll do some comparisons in just a moment. Again, it's charming, it's lovely, it's well written for voice. It sounds a lot like Mozart. If you didn't know who wrote it, you might think, hey, that sounds like Mozart to me. That doesn't mean that it's a great aria. It means that it's pleasant ear candy. Problem with Gazzaniga is he feels that it's the job of the words to tell you the story and tell you the character, and his job is limited to simply creating some pleasant music that you will enjoy. Again, the word generic applies there. If you didn't know what she was singing about, would you know what she was singing about? That music could equally be for an aria in praise of nature. Ah, the verdant meadow, the lush green forests, nature, nature, nature. It could be about religion and the church and the mercy of God. It could be about all sorts of things. There's nothing specific to Elvira's problem. Then we get to Mozart in the great aria, Mi tradii, he betrayed me. Mozart, being the great instinctive psychologist that he is, with his intuitive understanding of human nature, understands that she is trapped in a circle. Her mind is racing in circles. I hate him, I would take him back. I hope he dies, but when he smiles at me, I fall in love all over again. So he takes this as a challenge to try to represent circular thinking in abstract musical terms, and boy, did he nail it. Mozart came up with a musical motive, a short thematic idea that describes a loop. You hear it, right? You hear the contour seeming to rise and fall in a loop, thus conveying, thus symbolizing this circle of conflicting emotions that has trapped Donna Elvira. Now, in the aria Mi tradii, it is omnipresent. You hear it 90% of the time, not always in the vocal lines. Sometimes Elvira sings it, but sometimes it's in the orchestra underneath her, now in the flutes, now in the bassoon, now in the strings. Here's a portion of this aria, and all I can tell you, when you hear the entire thing, the constant repetition of this circle of musical motifs just becomes overwhelming. Now, if you can find a better example in the entire 400-plus year history of opera of a musical idea graphically describing and representing a psychological state, please email it to me and I will hand you a cigar, but I don't think you will. Well, again, the clock is ticking, and I've shown you about 6 or 7 snowflakes on top of the tip of the gigantic, masterful iceberg that is Mozart's Don Giovanni. Breaks my heart to have omitted any of the brilliant arias or ensembles that are just the glory of this glorious piece. But we're going to skip to the epilogue, to the conclusion. Don Giovanni is gone. He is down there, sharing a coffee, an espresso with Lucifer down in hell. He is in his everlasting punishment. And so Leporello is left to tell the tale. All the other characters, Elvira, Anna and Ottavio, Mazzetto and Zerlina, they come rushing in, and they get the news of Giovanni's fate from his servant. And there is an epilogue in which they all kind of stand in a row like sausages on a plate and sing to us about how villainy has been punished, and virtue has triumphed, and, the good guys win in the end, and so forth. And they all speak about what they're going to do next. Elvira, this tragic woman who never could let go of her obsession, kind of says, well, I'm done with men, I'm done with love, I'm just going to enter a convent and spend the rest of my days in prayer. Zerlina and Mazzetto are going to hurry home and have their wedding night and begin cranking out the 11 children that I'm sure Zerlina will bear for Mazzetto. And then there's Ottavio and Anna. Again, as I said, Ottavio says, well, perhaps this would be a good time to discuss our impending nuptials. Not now. No, I've got to be in mourning for a long time, at least a year. Well, the nature of this epilogue is very canny by Mozart, because these people are all boring. These are the virtuous people who are so self-satisfied in their virtue. Oh, they all follow the rules. Well, maybe not Leporello so much, but they all put zip code on their mail. They all brush and floss their teeth after every meal. They say their prayers. They give to charity. They follow the rules. They're the ones that God likes. And yet there's a blandness in their self-congratulatory expression that just makes me anyway, it makes me squirm. Listen to a little bit of Ottavio and Anna contemplating life without a villain. Something about the way they are exchanging those phrases, almost like a vocal competition. Anything you can sing, I can match you, interval for interval. I just start looking at my watch, and it occurs to me, I'm done with you people. As a matter of fact, you know who I miss? You know who I wish was back? That no-good, amoral monster, that murdering, thieving, lying, debauching seducer Don Giovanni. The person who he's terrible. He's the worst person that ever lived, and golly, I wish he was here right now because I kind of liked him. At least he wasn't dull like all of you people. And then, if you share that reaction with me, then you know what's going to wash all over you as the curtain comes down. You know the epiphany you're going to have. You're going to say, oh my God, Mozart just punked me. Mozart just played a joke on me. Because as it turns out, I was Don Giovanni's last victim. Don Giovanni seduced me, add my name to the little black book, because that vitality, that charisma, that life force that we heard at the beginning of this hour in Richard Strauss and in Mozart's overture, that got to me. I responded to it. He seduced me. He seduced everybody in the audience. We were his last victims. And don't think Mozart and Da Ponte didn't have a chuckle at our expense over that. Maybe someday I'll be able to meet with you guys individually, and we'll spend a few days talking about this iceberg, and I'll share with you everything I've learned in 50 years of knowing, exploring, and discovering this great work of Western man of the last millennia, Don Giovanni. I'll see you at the Opera House.